Stand by for action.
Every show we drop the needle on the tracks that were part of the mixed tapes and mixtapes of my 80s and 90s. Tunes that followed me on the train in the morning, on the way to my adventures on the weekend, and all the times in between. Please join me as I share a track from the record box, what I remember, a little bit of history, and a hell of a lot of nostalgia. I'm Michael, and please join me as we get lost in 12 inches. And drop. It's the Love Mix. And it's got a really long lead in this one. Wait for it. MiG-29 is the second release of the MiG series of songs. A Gianfranco Bortolotti project started in 1991 with Max Aventino and Francesco Scandolari. Various other media records artists were involved. Now, this version that I have is the 1992 UK release from Champion Records. It's a really great example of that early 90s techno that was coming out of Italy. It takes its vocal hook from Rochelle Fleming's 1985 track, Lovitch, and uses samples from The Prodigy, Mantronics, and Bizarre Inc. Tracks from two of these artists that I've already featured on this podcast. Now, this is a very niche track, and it's no real surprise that it didn't chart anywhere when it was released in 91 in Europe, or the 92 re-release in the UK. But for us in the Sydney rave scene in 92, it was a huge track. And when I hear this song, I think of the house that Chuck, Tim and Kit shared in Turramurra in 1992. Now, let's go back a bit. Chuck had moved to Japan with his family in late 1990. He made a trip back to Sydney in 91, and I talk about a memorable night from that trip in my last Train to Transceptual episode. But in early 1992, he moved back to Sydney. Now, I was still living on Crown Street at that stage, and the day that he arrived back, we went to have breakfast in Bill and Tony's. So from there, he moved into the house on Ku-ring-gai Avenue with Tim, Kit, and Michael. It was a fledgling band house. Tim and Kit would go on to form a band together in the subsequent years that had a modicum of success in the Sydney music scene. Now, I moved out of the house on Crown Street to Wall's house in Gordon a couple of weeks after Chuck moved back, which made this house in Turramurra the focal point for our social circle throughout 1992. The house was probably built back in the 1920s with two bedrooms at the front. These were occupied by Tim and Kit, and Chuck was in probably what was meant to be a dining room in the middle of the house. It was a strange room to be sleeping in as it had no windows and therefore no natural light. Now, next to that room, there was a good-sized living room, which was the sort of kind of the center of the house, really. Now, the kitchen was behind that, and that was a really good size. Now, the house itself was on a really sloped block, so as you went out the back door, there was a long set of stairs that led down to the backyard. I did spend a lot of my spare time at this place, walking up the Pacific Highway from Gordon, up the Pimble Hill, past the servo, where I would normally stop to pick up a sun-kissed orange slushie. This is a trek I would make regularly when I wasn't in Chatswood working on Quiet Earth with Rod, or in Balgowlah helping get things set up for the weekend's festivities. Most Mondays we'd sit on the front veranda and listen to Nick Fisher's Musicarium on 2SER to hear the latest tracks. Coincidentally, that was probably the first time we heard MiG-29. Other days we just spent hanging out, the kind of stuff you did in your downtime. But then, once the weekend came, that was our base of operations. If I wasn't working at the weekend party, this is where we'd all meet. Well, maybe not every weekend, but some of them. And I do remember leaving from here to go to the free tribal rave, which was out in the country, out in the bush somewhere. There were other memorable nights that took place here, and the one that really springs to mind was Tim's 21st birthday party. He'd chosen a golden glitter theme for the evening. Now, I think that Wal and I may have gone a bit overboard on our costumes for the evening. Now, she'd made us matching outfits. Gold lame hot pants for me, and the same for her with a matching conical bra. You know, the type that Madonna was wearing back in the day. But I had decided to paint myself gold. Now, this was a bit of a mistake, as the paint was probably copper-based, and within an hour of putting it on, it had turned green. So by the time we arrived at the party, I had a definite green tinge. And this was something that everyone pointed out to me. This is probably the reason why I don't do fancy dress anymore. Now, this house was an important place. For me, it was kind of a link back to my teenage years. I hadn't really kept in contact with most of my school friends, Chuck being the exception, but it was a connection to my other group of friends. And though in the coming months, this would change. My life would spiral. My actions would make me a bit of a pariah within this group. I'd lose connections with people who, for such a long time, well, long then, and as I look back now, I'm kind of saddened by this. I would see these people in subsequent years when the consequences of my actions had faded into memory slightly, but things were never really the same again. So, here comes the question I ask at the end of every episode. Would MiG-29 end up in one of my monthly playlists if the algorithm fed it to me? The love mix, yes. The other side, not so much. And now we are at the end of another nostalgia trip. If you've enjoyed listening to me ramble on, please subscribe to get notified when I release new episodes. I'm on all the socials, so check me out there. Thanks for listening to Lost in 12 Inches. I'm Michael, and as I always say, testicles.